Throughout the world, more than 40 million people are currently living with HIV/AIDS. The epicenter of the epidemic rests in Africa. Of the 2.8 million people who died of AIDS in 2004, 79% were Africans. Every day, between 6,000 and 8,000 people die of AIDS in Africa. That's 2.5 times the number of people that died in the September 11th attacks. What if the United States lost this many people each day? By 2020, most, if not all, of the 25 million people in sub-Saharan Africa who are living with HIV/AIDS will be dead. HIV/AIDS is spreading throughout other parts of the world, specifically in India, China, Russia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Unless action is taken, Asia will outnumber sub-Saharan Africa in HIV/AIDS infections before 2010. How do women fit into this global puzzle? Increasingly, researchers are finding that the AIDS pandemic has a woman's face. Across the world, women's infection rates are increasing faster than men's. Young women are 1.6 times more likely to be living with HIV/AIDS than young men. The impact is most significant on women in developing countries, particularly those within Africa, where 77% of the world's HIV-positive women reside. In sub-Saharan Africa, 57% of those infected with HIV are women, and this percentage continues to escalate. Between the ages of 15 and 24, girls are more than 3 times as likely to be infected than boys. What makes women biologically vulnerable to AIDS? The bottom line is that women's anatomy is in itself more conducive to HIV than men's anatomy. Semen infected with HIV typically contains a higher concentration of virus than a woman's secretion. Furthermore, women have a larger surface area of reproductive tissue that is exposed to their partner's secretions during intercourse than men do. This interior tissue is also more fragile than the tough exterior skin covering the male reproductive organ. As a result, women's reproductive anatomy makes male-to-female transmission during sex twice as likely than female-to-male transmission. For the same reasons, women have a greater risk than men of contracting other sexually transmitted diseases that weaken the body. When STDs are left untreated, as they oftentimes are, the risk of contracting HIV increases tenfold. Around the world, dangerous sexual behaviors put women's bodies at risk, making them more vulnerable to HIV. Sex between young girls and older men is a crucial factor in the spread of the epidemic. Young girls have a greater risk of contracting HIV during sex since the lining of an immature reproductive system is less tough and thus is more prone to microtears that allow infection. Dry sex is another practice common in some African cultures that puts women at risk.
I understand some of them are using dental. You know what is dental? Toothpaste. Yeah, which they put in the vagina so the vagina can be dry. And some of them are using powder. Some of them are using dental. And some of them are using, you know what is a tampon? which you put in the vagina when you are on menstruation. So they put it on when you are not on menstruation, and then the vagina will be dry. And there are, in some culture, they have got some stones which they pound, and it will become like powder, and then they smear there in the vagina, and then the vagina is dry. So they have dry sex with her, so that the vagina can be small and tight, and the husband to love her more.
Another biological factor affecting women is mother-to-child transmission. MTCT accounts for 12 to 15% of infections in sub-Saharan Africa. When a mother is HIV positive, her baby can become infected prenatally, during delivery, or postnatally through breastfeeding. Infection is most common during delivery.
There are those children who are infected and they don't know about it. They don't know that they are infected, and they might infect others, which means that the disease will still spread.
Nevirapine is a drug that can reduce the transmission of HIV/AIDS by as much as 53%. However, many women are unaware that they are infected when they give birth. Making this drug available to pregnant women in high-risk areas is a crucial step in fighting the future spread of the virus. A woman is more vulnerable to HIV simply because of the way her body is built. Sadly, many cultural and economic factors often further limit her ability to protect herself from infection.
Gender inequalities in Africa, they operate so much here in Africa, where you find that many cultures and many communities promote the male image, the male dominance in relationship, male dominance, cultural laws, customs, and even some country laws. There are countries where a woman cannot own anything. There are inheritances where a woman cannot inherit the property of her husband. And a woman cannot hold a job, even if she may be educated, but it dictates that she has to give up her job in favor for the man to continue supporting the family. So when it comes to negotiations, she's already at a weak point. She cannot negotiate with her partner for safe sex. It's her partner to decide on that.
Culturally, African men have the exclusive right to decide when, how, and why to have sex with women in or out of marriage. Women risk sexual violence if they refuse sexual intercourse for reasons of health, safety, or tiredness.
And you're talking about young girls who are physically smaller, who may be virgins and have an unwanted sexual experience due to the gender imbalance, due to the frequency of rape and violence that occurs. Again, all of this social upheaval. So it's no wonder that our HIV rate is growing as rapidly as it can.
Increasingly, researchers are documenting what many women have known for a long time. Being married is a major risk factor in contracting HIV/AIDS.
I would say that married women are the most vulnerable people to HIV because it's very difficult for them to discuss safe sex.
Traditional African culture demands that a husband and wife have unprotected sex, both for the pleasure of the man and for the purpose of producing children.
Is it difficult to convince men to use condoms?
In particular, the Herero tradition is quite difficult. Like when she's now here and the man, her husband is at the farm, when she go back and tell the men that, okay, let's use a condom right now because, you know, some changes that have happened. So let's use a condom. Then the men will be annoyed that, how come that you are telling me to use a condom? So you have been cheating on me. That's why you are telling me to use a condom. So there is a problem, really a problem between the men and the women.
It's very difficult for a man and a woman if they have been staying in the relationship for more than 20 years. And after 20 years, you come and say, let's use a condom. So that's why men are just accusing women that you have been faithful. Why should you ask me to use a condom? All these years we haven't used a condom, but now we have to use a condom.
In many African cultures, it is acceptable for married men to have multiple sexual partners. Women, however, are expected to remain faithful to their husbands.
In Namibia, men have got a right to go to another woman. Your husband might leave you just for another woman because that woman doesn't want to use a condom. As a woman, you can be faithful. You can be faithful, and you can show it. Everybody can see that this woman is faithful, but you can still get that AIDS from your husband because of his behaviors.
In order to support their families, many men must work away from home and return only periodically throughout the year. During their time away, extramarital affairs are common, leaving their wives vulnerable to being infected once their husbands return home.
Once they come back and they want to have a sexual intercourse with their wives, they might bring HIV. And for the wives, for the married women, it is very difficult there then to ask for safe sex.
Even in the United States, where condoms are readily available and more socially accepted, many women still struggle to negotiate condom use with their partners. In Africa, the burden of HIV/AIDS frequently falls on women.
Women have to do the dirty work every time. Men don't care. They know that if he got sick, there is somebody who will come and take care of him, his sister or his mother. Or even if he left his wife and he got sick, the family have to go and get the wife to come and care for the husband.
The many myths surrounding HIV and AIDS often have devastating consequences, particularly for women.
Yeah, it was a big person who gave her that disease. He was belief in him because he think old men cannot have that disease. So it's you get it from the old man. The man is old. The man is old.
Women are the primary caregivers for the hundreds of thousands of children orphaned by HIV/AIDS.
The grandmothers, the aunties, they can't do it themselves. The grandmothers who've absorbed these children are themselves dying. It's one thing to lose your mother and your father to death to HIV or some other illness because the other ones still continue. You're then absorbed in your grandmother's household, and then your grandmother gets sick, and then your grandmother dies, and you have to go through this again.
Remarkably, in addition to caring for the sick and orphaned, women are the ones taking action to fight the spread of HIV/AIDS. In non-governmental organizations, in schools, and in hospitals, it is women who are taking leadership roles to address the pandemic.
They are speaking out. They are educating the communities, and they are also the ones who are doing home-based care for people who are sick. And they are also the ones who are taking care of the orphans.
Anita is one of the many HIV-positive women across the world actively fighting the spread of the virus. In addition to leading an organization that supports HIV-infected women, Anita speaks publicly, urging others to be tested and to not be ashamed to reveal their status.
That's why most of the people are coming. Some of them are coming and even say thank you. The way you talk, you wake me up.
Iria Narajalango, a middle school health sciences teacher, heard Anita speak one day and it changed her life forever.
I attended a HIV/AIDS workshop for teachers. Mr. Anita Isaacs, coordinator of Rironga Eparu for Oshana, spoke to us about living with HIV. She spoke freely without fear. From her speech, I had the courage. I thought, why is she able to speak? I also have the virus, but I'm quiet. I decided to tell the group at the workshop that I am HIV positive. Before I spoke, I felt like I was carrying something heavy, like a stone. But when I spoke, I felt comfortable, like the weight was gone. I decided not to hide anymore.
Tight like this, yeah.
The first I told the teachers, maybe it took 30 minutes without anybody to say something. Some were crying, some were just, their face just kneel down. And after maybe 30 minutes, some they come to shake hand with me, to thank me that what you did is good. It's good, and then it's a good example to others.
Because of the increased workload, women are unable to devote themselves to necessary jobs to keep households running. Fields lay fallow, income becomes sparse, and then poverty pushes women into dangerous behavior.
Prostitution, in terms of a profession, is known here, but not to a large extent. More often, it's young girls, young women, who, for the favors of food, of perhaps something nice, some clothes, a little bit of relief from the poverty that they're experiencing, will go out with a sugar daddy, go out with an older man who can promise them a good time, or more blatantly sell their bodies for sex for a night or two.
If you compare now a young girl growing up in Switzerland and a young girl growing up here, every young girl likes to wear nice shoes or likes to have nice dresses or so. And in Switzerland I can go and work somewhere and earn my money and buy that. But here my only possibility is to have a sugar daddy relationship.
Unlike in the United States, a free education is not provided to children in many parts of Africa. As a result, parents will resort to desperate measures to fund their children's education.
I can give an example of a man. He is working in Oranje-Mund. He's a very wealthy man. His wife died of AIDS. And everybody in the village knew that his wife died of AIDS, you see? Now there was a widow. She was alone with her children. She doesn't have anything. So now this man was offering that, I'm going to give you 200. So she have to go and sleep with this man to get that 200 in order to pay school fees for the children.
In addition to lack of funding, children may also be kept out of school to care for an HIV-positive family member. Generally, it is the daughters who are asked to stay home, while the sons further their education.
I completed my grade 7, so I was supposed to go to high school. I didn't have enough money. Who was supposed to pay my school fees? My mom was sick, she couldn't work. My aunt was all nasty and rude all the time. So at the end, I was about to lose school. Last year I didn't went to school because there's no money for further studying, and it's like I didn't perform good in grade 12 grades because I was having a problem with my parents. My father, who passed away that time, I didn't study really, and now I don't have money to go further my study or to go improve my grades.
Now again, Itumba is going to explain for us how to use a male condom in order to protect yourself from not getting pregnancy and not getting HIV virus.
Global statistics clearly demonstrate that the more educated a woman is, the more control she has over all aspects of her life. Thus, a less educated woman is at greater risk to contract HIV/AIDS. Contracting HIV is not only a death sentence for the infected individual, but an assurance of hard times for the entire family. The HIV/AIDS pandemic is creating horrific economic burdens. Families, often struggling to even put food on the table, now have to pay for medications, hospital fees, funerals, and often absorb extra financial burdens for the caretaking of orphans.
We have got the ARVs now in the hospital, but the most problem which is facing Namibia is poverty. I'm paying my antiretroviral drugs on my own because by then it was around 4,000
per year?
Per month.
Per month?
Yes, 4,000 Namibian dollars. What about those people who doesn't have any job, who doesn't have any income? It means that everyone is just suffering, those who have got HIV and AIDS.
Why can someone who was born here not get antiretroviral treatment? If by coincidence that person would have been born in Switzerland, she would have all the services she needs.
Medications, including antiretrovirals, are increasingly available to Africans, but the rising rates of infections continually keeps demand much higher than the supply. Even when medication is affordable and available, having a stable infrastructure such as pharmacy equipment and space, trained personnel, transportation, and communication is essential. The irony is that in sub-Saharan countries where HIV is a problem, the working members of society who are combating the disease are the ones getting sick.
HIV/AIDS has also affected the nursing profession. If 22.5% of people are positive, that means 20% of our nurses are positive.
Even after death, the virus impacts the remaining family members, and this burden is borne more by the women and children than by the men.
Funerals cost 3, 4, 5, 6 months' wages oftentimes. It's very devastating. This is the wage earner who's dying. This is the mother of the children who is dying. So families will be impoverished during the last phase of illness tremendously. It is absolutely devastating from a financial point of view.
Sure.
In addition to advocating abstinence, all governments should fund programs that give women the power to control their lives and bodies. There are no quick and simple solutions. What we do know is that policy changes that address the inequality between men and women must be encouraged.
Our world is perishing, and AIDS is not only a case for Africa. It's something which is touching all our lives globally. And I'm calling upon leaders of this world to act now and to help those people who are there on the ground, otherwise we will perish. More education has to be done. More women have to be empowered, more women have to get involved in the fight, and we will see a brighter future.
Understanding a problem is the first step to solving it efficiently. AIDS cannot be fully understood without realizing that the virus both infects and affects women more than men, biologically, culturally, and economically. Our goal has been to wake you up to the fact that the AIDS pandemic is not gender neutral, especially in Southern Africa. We must look at this global crisis through the eyes of women and walk away knowing that AIDS must be addressed through a gendered approach. You have invested a half hour of your life watching this documentary and learning about women and HIV/AIDS. Take this information, wake others up.